The title of my presentation is not concept of food packaging safety, it is Siegwerk's concept of food packaging safety, and I will continue my presentation with the glass. Jörg showed the glass which is half full, and we fill the glass so that it is completely full, and I will explain how we will do that. Food packaging safety is a must-have. I think all of us are clear about that. And there are three challenges from my point of view which we are facing. The first one is the regulatory compliance. The problem here is that the numbers of regulations are continuously increasing if we are looking on a global scale. And this is really a challenge. Why? Because the regulations are not harmonized at all. So, as Jörg already mentioned, regulation in Europe is different than regulation in the US. Regulation in the US is different than regulation in Asia. And for a global player like Siegwerk, this is a problem, or not a problem, of course we solve the problem, but it is a challenge. Yeah? Next one is consumer safety. Why do I mention consumer safety explicitly? Because of the fact that consumer safety is not in all regions of the world already ensured by the regulation. We need, in addition to the regulation, take additional measures in order to make sure that consumer safety is guaranteed. And one key element of consumer safety, if we talk about food packaging safety, is migration. Migration is the transfer of a substance from or through the packaging into food. And this needs to be carefully controlled. And finally, perceived safety. Maybe you have never heard about perceived safety, but it is getting more and more important. So, consumers' perception is reality. And if consumer assumes a product is unsafe, even if there's no scientific evidence for it, then we have a problem. Yeah? Because at least the consumer buys the product. And if the consumer feels unsafe and does not buy the product anymore, then the company has a problem. Yeah? And due to the social media, which really have a strong impact and a strong influence, it's getting even more complicated. Yeah? So if you read in the social media a certain product is unsafe, then next morning it goes around the world and can have a huge impact for the business of a company. So what can we do against it? The only thing we can do is to be transparent and openly share what we are doing in terms of consumer safety. So this slide, I call it the temple of compliance. Compliance does not only consist of a legal part, of course, that's very important, and we need to make sure that we are legally compliant. But Jörg also mentioned that certain brand owners, like Nestle, Perfetti, he mentioned, have their own guidelines, their own standards, which are globally applicable and which are going beyond what is legally required. And in addition to that, there are also certain self-commitments available on Siegwerk level, and I will explain later on what kind of self-commitments we as Siegwerk have implemented in order to increase consumer safety. But let's also talk again about migration. as it is so important. I already mentioned that migration is the transfer of a substance from and through the packaging into food. And it doesn't matter whether it is an intentionally added substance or a non-intentionally added substance. It's just a substance transfer. We generally differentiate three different principles of migration. On the left side, you can see the most prominent example, which is migration according to the diffusion principle. So there are red dots on the packaging material, which are the migrants, which are also available in printing inks, and then can migrate through the packaging, and finally you can detect them in the noodles. Secondly, set of migration. Here you need to consider that these cups can be stacked, and then the printed side is in contact with the inner surface of the next cup. And as soon as you fill beverage, coffee, tea into the cup, then there can be migrants on the inner side, and finally can be drunk by the consumer. Third example, gas phase migration. This has not necessarily something to do with printing inks. So for example, can also be mineral oils which are available from packaging material. And here, migrants can migrate via the gas phase through the packaging into the food, and could also, a source of gas phase transfer could also be migrants from secondary or even tertiary packaging. And that's, for example, also the reason why we at Siegwerk, we do not differentiate our safety standards from primary, secondary and tertiary packaging. So we do not have different safety standards. We just talk about food packaging inks independently, whether they are used for primary, secondary or even tertiary packaging. Next slide is not coming. Here we are. These are an overview about the global trends which are available. So I already mentioned that legislation is becoming more and more specific and stricter. The basic number of regulations which are available and which we need to follow is continuously increasing. A reason for that were food safety scandals in the past as disrupted events which triggered stricter regulations or even new regulations. There is more knowledge available about packaging, about the interaction between packaging and foodstuff, which is good, which gives us the opportunity to increase the safety. There's also more knowledge available about, especially about non-intentionally added substances. So the power of analytics is also continuously increasing, and analytical labs are detecting more and more substances, and we are confronted with these substances, and we need to assess the substance, or we need to discuss with analytical labs whether the substance are coming from the printing inks or from other sources. Because unfortunately, if you have a migrant, it is unclear where the migrant is coming from. Is the migrant coming from the packaging material? Is the migrant coming from contamination? Is the migrant coming from printing ink? So at least it is, sometimes there's discussion who's responsible for the migrant, and finally who's responsible for the safety assessment. And finally, compliance control activities are also increasing. So from authority side, as well as from third-party lab side or supply chain partners. So that was my introduction, and now I would like to share with you what is Siegwerk doing in order to guarantee safe inks. So at least I would like to talk in the next 20 minutes about 4 different aspects. The first one is the Siegwerk exclusion policy. I will explain to you what's behind. Secondly, foresighted adaptation. That is a measure which goes even beyond the exclusion policy. Then our PSR management system, which makes sure that we stick to our commitments. And finally, activities which are related to transparency. So the Siegwerk exclusion policy is actually based on the EUPIA, the European Printing Ink Association, on the EUPIA exclusion policy, but the EUPIA exclusion policy, strictly spoken, is only applicable in Europe. And we as Siegwerk have the self-commitment to apply this EUPIA exclusion policy on a global scale. So each printing ink we provide in the world follows the principle of the EUPIA exclusion policy, and for that reason we called it Siegwerk exclusion policy. What's behind? There are certain groups of substances, CMR, carcinogenic, mutagenic, reprotoxic substances, category 1A and 1B, which are generally excluded. And in addition to that, some other toxic substances which are not used in our printing inks. Sometimes there is a reclassification available, simply due to the fact that new toxicological data are available, and then we have to react. So that means, as soon as, for example, a substance is reclassified from reprotoxic category 2 to reprotoxic category 1, that is for us a trigger to substitute the substance. So there's a substitution principle by default. And in order to enable also converters to go with us, for a certain period of time it is allowed to further use the substance, but at least after a certain period of time, the substance needs to be substituted. In addition to the exclusion policy, there are other substances of concern which do not fall under the definition of the exclusion policy, but from our point of view, they should not be part of our printing inks. You can see here some examples: phenol pigments, cobalt dryers, phthalates, mineral oils, PFAS. All these substances are not used by Siegwerk or have certain certain restrictions. And you can also see here toluene. For nutrition, pharma, hygiene ink applications, our inks we are toluene-free, yeah, and we are proud about that. And please allow me to talk for the next 5 minutes a little bit about toluene. Short introduction: toluene is a solvent. It is used in packaging gravure printing, widespread use in Asia. There are reasons for that, business reasons, not safety reasons, business reasons. Excellent solving properties, easily available, cheap, Concentration of toluene in solvent-based inks can be up to 40%. And unfortunately, the switch to toluene-free inks is slowing down. It's getting very slow. In this slide, I summarized toxicological hazards of toluene. And from my point of view, the highest concern you see on this side, it is about reprotoxicity. So that means toluene can harm the unborn child of pregnant woman. That is really a serious hazard. And please keep in mind, toluene in Indonesia is on the positive list. Such a hazardous substance. In other countries, there are thresholds. When my wife was pregnant, she was not calculating in the evening how many glasses of wine can I drink or how many beer can I drink. It was zero. Zero. And again, in Indonesia, toluene is on the positive list. In other countries, there are thresholds. From toxicological point of view, it makes absolutely no sense. And I can only encourage you, converters which are here, to go for toluene-free inks, to take your responsibility and switch from toluene-based inks to toluene-free inks, because it's really a hazardous material which should not be available in food contact materials. There are other hazards, not only reprotoxicity. If I go to the left side, ototoxicity. That's also an interesting topic. Ototoxicity means toxic to the ear. And I remember very well, some years back, Jörg and myself, we visited a converter here in Indonesia, and they confirmed that they had issues with hardness of hearing. Toluene-based, they use toluene-based inks in production, and some workers, they suffered from hardness of hearing. So it is not only a health issue for the consumer, it is also an occupational safety issue. And in addition to that, you see it over there, toluene can create hallucinations. So what does it mean? It means it can be used as a sniffing drug. And it is a matter of fact that this is, for example, a huge problem in Singapore. So toluene is easily available, but it is a gateway drug. People can get addicted. So it is not only a solvent, it is also a drug. So many reasons which speak against the use of toluene as solvent. My colleague Abadesh later on will explain what alternatives are available, what safe alternatives are available, and he will also talk about performance of these alternatives. So I've talked about toxicological hazards of toluene. In addition to that, I also need to mention organoleptic properties. So that means toluene really has a bad smell, and the odor threshold is really low. It's around 260 ppb, and we did internally some measurements, taking samples from the supermarket, and did toluene analysis, and in a couple of samples, the toluene content was clearly in food, was clearly above the order threshold. So that means as soon as you open a package, bad smell of toluene. But nobody cares, obviously. So if I compare this here in Asia, what measures are taken if you try to carry a durian into a hotel, nearly impossible. Yeah? I tried one time. I was catched, impossible. Yeah? But toluene, obviously, not an issue. No? So, let's leave toluene. I think I said enough about toluene. I made my point, and now it's up to you to decide. Back to Siegwerk. What kind of processes are in place in order to support our customers? So we have systematic processes in place. So I already talked about voluntary commitments, about the exclusion policy, about foresighted adaptation of our raw material portfolio, which even goes beyond the Siegwerk exclusion policy. I need to explain now how we make sure that we stick to our own commitments. So we have a highly sophisticated raw material introduction process available, which is running centrally. And as soon as a new raw material is subject to introduction, potential supplier receives a questionnaire, very comprehensive questionnaire, and needs to complete this questionnaire. And part of the questions are related to our exclusion criteria, our purity standards, also to compliance with legislation in certain regions. And Jörg mentioned that we spend specific attention to so-called nutrition, pharma, hygiene product applications, and for these kind of products, it is required to have 100% information of the raw materials, not 99.8%, 100% must be transparent and must be shared to us, which enables us to transparently share this information with our customers and to prepare, to evaluate and prepare, be prepared for savings. So what we are doing with this information, it enters in a so-called formulation guideline, which is guidance for our technology departments globally. So very basic principle is that the formulation guideline follows a traffic light principle. So that means as soon as there is green light, there are no further concerns for use in any region. Orange light means that there are remaining uncertainties, and red light means a block. Yeah? Very simple. And the formulation guideline is separated into different regions simply due to the fact that the legislation is not globally harmonized. Secondly, we are providing guidance to our customers. We do this, for example, with a technical data sheet, which gives the converters additional information for which application ink can be used and how to print the ink. And we also, for our nutrition, pharma, hygiene inks, we also have a statement of composition available. But before I come to the statement of composition, you can just see here the complexity of the packaging chain. Yeah? So here we have our raw material suppliers. We as printing ink manufacturer are in a kind of sandwich position. So we need to receive information from our raw material suppliers, then the information is digested on our side, and then we prepare statement of composition to our customers, which are the converters. Of course, we also need to be aware of specific requirements on brand owner level in order to make sure that a converter who is printing for a certain brand owner is also complying with the respective brand owner requirements. And very simple, due to the complexity, the principle is shit in, shit out. Yeah? So if we do not receive good information from our raw material suppliers, we cannot provide good information to our customers. And for that reason, I just mentioned when I shared with you our raw material introduction process, we have this very comprehensive questionnaire, which must be completed by our suppliers, and this enables us to provide important information to our converters, which are required for their compliance work. So the statement of composition contains information about all potentially migrating substances, details on the identification, on the identity, on the concentration, on certain restrictions from legal point of view. It also contains a worst case calculation, which is the maximum possible migration. If applicable, if NIAS are part of the ink formulation, it also contains NIAS risk assessment. There's also a detailed customer manual available in English language, which supports you in reading a statement of composition. And as I already mentioned, the prerequisite for a good and valuable statement of composition is information from our suppliers. Finally, proactive work for product safety. We are also involved in associations, in certain lobbying activities, and in addition to that, we offer trainings, workshops, and I would like to specifically mention our ink safety portal. So actually, my expectation after this event, and we have a lot of people here in this room, my expectation is 30 new registrants this evening. So please do not disappoint me. It's very easy to register. You just have to screen this QR code or go to our website, and then you only have to enter your email address, create your password. It's free of any charge, and there's really valuable information available in the portal. There's even a worst case calculator which you can use. You can make your own worst case calculations. You can download PDF files of your calculations. Know-how brochure, which is not really a brochure, it is a book. It is a scientific book with valuable information around ink safety. You can download it as PDF file. So I can only encourage you to register. And as I said, my target is for this evening 30 new registrants. So please do not disappoint me. So I come to an end of my presentation. And I would like to highlight that product safety and responsibility is embedded in our sustainability strategy. So we have 4 pillars in our sustainability strategy. First one is related to operations and supply chain. Then we have circular economy and people and communities. But here, number 2, product safety and responsibility. And it is linked in the blue box to our ambition being the trendsetter for safest inks and coatings by proactively improving our own products and setting new industry standards in consumer as well as in environmental safety. And this is my very last slide. What's the benefit? I just want to highlight the benefit for the customer, for you. And the benefit, on the one hand, is that we are leading the safety standards by continuously improving and adapting our self-commitments. And secondly, it is about risk mitigation, which is done by careful compliance monitoring and sharing information in a transparent way. Thank you for your attention.